Well, good morning, everybody. I see not everybody went home last night. Well, let me introduce ourselves. My name is Mario, and it's Andrea. We both work in Semantic, in security response. And today we want to talk about rootkits. It's going to be an overview of the different rootkit techniques that we're seeing nowadays. We're going to talk about the rootkit landscape. We'll see a few techniques. We'll see a few proof of concept and a few real-life examples. But we're not going to cover like application of specific rootkits, like rootkits for databases or for browsers. So the talk comprises two main blocks. The first block is going to be about Windows rootkits and about rootkits for PC hardware. That will be covered by Andrea. And then my part is about dedicated platforms. We'll cover two real cases that happen in the wild. One of them is the Ericsson rootkit, and another one is the Stuxnet, which you probably have heard about. And then we'll talk about rootkits for mobile devices. There's a few proof of concepts, and we'll see how the situation like now. So I'm handing it over to Andrea, and he'll start with well, first of all, we'll have a look to the timeline. The guys from the security that were talking yesterday about the brain virus, that was the first software which had like rootkit capabilities. On the early 90s, the first Linux rootkits started to appear. The main development of Linux rootkits was in the early, well, in the late 90s and then in the 2000s. That's where the most advanced Linux rootkits were developed, like the Suget or Ador. And then lately, on these past years, Windows, the most rootkits that have been developed, they were for Windows platforms and for title like past year, for instance, we have like Tidserv 64, Stuxnet, and two proof of concept for mobile platforms. So I'll hand it over to Andrea, and he'll talk about Windows rootkits. Is that okay?
Yeah. So we can start when we look at Windows rootkits. Like the Windows scene is the most active in this activity. I prepared a quick grid. I building with some of the major techniques and rootkits you have seen in these latest years. I put in the horizontal axis the timeline, and on the vertical axis the actually depth that the rootkits reach in their techniques. You can see actually they go from ring 3 to ring 0 all the way down to the hardware. I'm using ring -3. You may be aware there is not such a thing in the hardware, but I'm just actually reusing the terms from the rescue paper in a proof of concept that I'm going to demonstrate. Well, also Stuxnet, we filled it in the right ring -3, but as you may know, the Stuxnet infection could be a kind of a hybrid case. It wouldn't really fit properly anywhere in this grid, but we'll talk about it later. So if you have a look at the Windows kernel, we can start seeing the virus trends, the rootkit trends. Actually, they started on a very high level, and then they went all the way down in the lowest possible level in order to perform hiding and malicious activities. This is actually an example of what would be the internal stack of the file system in the Windows kernel. Of course, the driver names may vary according to the hardware you may have. But normally, actually, whenever an application is performing an input-output request on this volume, the object manager generates an IFP, which is an input request packet, which is processed by the file system. So the file system is organized in several different layers. Every layer has its own specific functionality. So the NTFS is the actually layer that handles the file system, and the class driver, the class layer, it handles the volume as a boot data. And the port layer is the one that makes the hardware communication. And so the IFP simply traverses all these layers in order to be processed. And then when the hardware gives back the data from the disk or whatever, the IFP is sent back to the application. So any of these layers is a possible attack point, attack vector for a rootkit. And in fact, the first rootkits started appearing in the file system level, and this dates before 2005. The biggest name we would have is the earlier Bluescott samples, which were dated also around 2005 and 2005. And they were simply operating at the file system level, so whenever the requests were coming in or out, these techniques, they were just filtering out particular file names or directory names to actually hide them from Win3. They were also blocking access if the applications were trying to delete a particular file that was protected by the rootkit. But then the rootkits, they started moving down, especially with the advent of memroot. Memroot is a rootkit that modifies, the MBR, and so at this level, there is no concept of file system anymore. So the class driver just handles I/O requests as bulk data offsets from a volume, whichever it is. So all MBR was interested in doing is hiding its own infected MBR, which is actually, it was only trying to check if anybody was trying to read the disk sector, the first disk sector that contains the MBR. And well, going further down, we are with Tidserv and also memroot last year. They moved even down in the chain, in the bot layer, so they are now in the lowest layer in the file system chain. And this is again a layer where actually it receives the requests from the class layer and translates them into SCSI request blocks, which are actually just data structure that are translated internally to actually deal with the hardware, which could be either SCSI or whatever. So again, Tidserv is not interested in file system or anything. It's just trying to hide any disk-read sector, which involves the sectors that Tidserv itself is hiding. So Tidserv is hiding the MBR again, and some disk sectors from the boot space from the slug space in the partition in the NTF file system. It's where Tidserv hides all the data usually. Talking about Tidserv in particular, we observed recently in this summer the first Tidserv rootkit for 64-bit, which is actually the first rootkit targeting 64-bit platforms in the world. But the problem is it was targeting Windows 7. And in Windows 7, there is limited access to the volumes, like C or physical drive 0. And you need to run sign drivers or you can upload your rootkit. But Tidserv was able to actually bypass in a clever way these limitations. I actually found out that the disk is not accessible normally for blind read writes, like they used to do to infect the MBR. But there is still the SCSI pass-through I/O control, which is available. I think probably, I don't know, this could be considered a bug. And via this I/O control, you can actually have access in write mode to the disk. And so this way, they are able to write their own malicious MBR. And they force the machine to shut down. And this was actually explained yesterday in the secure talk, if you've seen it already. So I go quickly through this. The MBR will just install a hook on the interrupt 13, which is the interrupt used in the boot mode to read data from the disk. So the first stage is actually to Tidserv will modify the data being read on the fly from the binary configuration data, which is where actually the information about which modality we are booting is held. So Tidserv will actually modify this data to make the WinLoad component of Windows 7 believe that we're going to put in WinPE mode. WinPE mode is a management mode, which is actually contains a bare-bone version of the Windows kernel. It's actually used just to run a simple environment to start the management task or reinstall the operating system. What's important is that at this stage, the WinPE mode drivers do not need to be signed. They can be running unsigned. So this is actually what Tidserv is trying to exploit to load its own driver in memory. But WinLoad will also load the KDCOM DLL, which is the normal system kernel debugger DLL, which will be modified by the Tidserv itself. We'll see that in the next slide. But of course, once we load this in WinPE mode, it will normally boot the operating system in WinPE mode. So to prevent this and resume normal booting, again, Tidserv kicks in and tries to remove the mini-NT flag, which will be passed to the CentOS kernel to specify that we are going to put the WinPE mode. So whenever WinLoad is going to load the kernel, the mini-NT flag is trashed, and actually the normal operating system proceeds going on with its normal load. And actually the WinLoad component also loads the KDCOM, as I just said. This DLL is a standard DLL that handles debugging, kernel debugging features, so it's a driver. And when the WinLoad is reading this DLL from the disk, the interrupt 13 kicks in again and provides the fake data, which is the malicious DLL of Tidserv. This fake data, so it's not signed and it gets loaded into the kernel and will eventually, in the end, deliver, actually map the Tidserv rootkit and do all the malicious stuff. So this is more or less the note about Tidserv. We now shift towards the x86 hardware. So now we were targeting Windows, but then the rootkits, they also started taking advantage of new hardware feature or other hardware features that may be present and not very well documented. And also these attacks now, they start being more cross-platform, because when you start attacking the hardware, you control the machine at a very low level, so you could be infecting Windows, Linux, or whichever operating system. And I did a quick messy schematics of the internal of a machine. And so, yeah, as you know, all the machines, all the pieces of the internal of the computer are different entities working together, and each one has a particular task. But we know that all these tasks, all these pieces have chipsets, their own memory, their own flash memory. So every one of these components actually again an attack vector for the rootkit. In particular, the memory controller hub is the central part of the whole architecture because it handles all the requests for memory and the communication between the components. So we'll see later an attack on this as well. We start from the CPU again. The first thing when we hear about hardware, there was lots of discussing in the last years about the hypervisor and rootkit that can operate in the hypervisor level. So the hypervisor, you may be familiar with, is just used for hardware virtualization. It's just a simple set of instructions given by the CPU, which actually allows the hypervisor to monitor all the access of to actually the real hardware. So in this way, you could have a hypervisor running and multiple operating systems running on it. And of course, the hypervisor it's undetectable by design. So Intel actually just crafted the hypervisor instruction so that it will not be detected or affected by the guest operating system. So this means that the hypervisor is at a privilege level lower than the normal operating system, even if you're in 0. So you can quickly see how this could be exploited by a rootkit. So a rootkit that could install its own hypervisor monitor, or actually could exploit an existing hypervisor and injecting its code in the hypervisor component, would actually be outside of the reach of the operating system. So we wouldn't really have a way to detect or remove it. Or even worse, a rootkit could take over completely and legitimate hypervisor, and actually would be running would cause the legitimate hypervisor to run on top of the rootkit hypervisor. So the hypervisor itself would have total control of the machine and the hypervisor. And yeah, to do this actually, the rootkit needs to support nested virtualization, which is not a hardware feature. So when you use the instructions for the hardware virtualization, you won't be able to use them again because the hardware itself is not allowing you nested virtualization in a transparent way. So this is a functionality that should be in the hypervisor or in the rootkit. And the actually attack from Tosca, from the blue pill, was exactly doing this. This specific attack was an attack part of a trilogy of papers on owning the SAN virtualization. You may know them, they're very famous. And in this attack, she was able to actually overwrite the master boot record again. So whenever the machine was being rebooted, the blue pill MBR was loading, and all it does is start the blue pill loader, which in turn will start a new virtual machine, reloading the original MBR and just resuming normal operational flow. So in this case, the original MBR was actually going on and loading SAN hypervisor, and SAN again was loading its own virtual machine and then guest operating system. The important trick is actually that also blue pill was hiding itself because it was hooking the accesses to the interrupt 15, which was the access, the interrupt that actually controls the memory map. So basically, it was tricking SAN into believing that the memory where blue pill was didn't exist. So this was a very powerful technique. And as you can see, it's actually a virtual machine running inside a virtual machine. So you probably have seen the moving section. We're in the same case here. We can go also deeper. Now we are getting deeper into the hardware. We've seen proof of concepts of the system management mode rootkits. System management mode is a mode of operation of the CPU. In this mode is, as the name says, it's not for management and hardware, particular hardware tasks like handling power down, handling power policies, and all this stuff. Normally, Normally the BIOS loads its own, sets up the SMRAM, which is where the SMM code resides, and sets up its own handlers to handle specific hardware tasks. So normally if you have, for example, the keyboard keystrokes or network are communicating with your system, you will have the hardware triggering a signal. The signal is intercepted by the I/O API, which is goes on and forwards it to the local API of the CPU. And in the end, it gets this translated into an interrupt, and it goes to the operating system, which will handle this task. So in the case of a keyboard, it will actually deliver the keystroke to the application. And rootkit that can actually operate in system management mode could simply install its own handler in the SMRAM, which is a dedicated actually memory used by the system management mode. And a rootkit operating at this level is able to filter the signals coming from the hardware at a very low level before they can even reach the local API of the CPU. So basically, if you have keystrokes, we have seen proof of concept actually for a keylogger or a network backdoor. Because the malicious code was residing inside the SMRAM and would be triggered from specific network packets, and all of this is transparent to the operating system, and this would be even transparent to a hypervisor because it's a very low level attack. And what's worse is that actually the SMRAM can be configured. There are interesting 2 bits worth noticing for configuration. The open bit is actually can be set, and when the open is set, actually the accesses to SMRAM can be are normally routed through the SMRAM. So SMRAM is visible, can be read, modified, and rootkit could be detected if it was there. But the open flag could be set to 0, meaning that the access to the SMRAM are routed to the normal RAM. So effectively, SMRAM becomes invisible. And what's worse is that the delock bit can also be set so that actually the deopen and delock bits cannot be modified anymore. So the rootkit could actually install itself into the SMRAM and lock itself out of the system. So being completely out of reach from the operating system. We have also seen several BIOS infections, several proof of concept and techniques. This is not really new, and the approach is straightforward. Basically, there were attacks on active BIOSes, and this active BIOS comes with its own standard language, which is just a programming language specifically created for the BIOS. So it also comes with compilers and decompilers. So what you could do, you can just extract the BIOS, decompile it, add your code, and then reflash it. There's not much to say. There are some mitigation factors, like some updates need to be signed, but still the BIOS is quite a vulnerable place. The proof of concept from Hisman to Blackout 2006 was actually very simple, but also very powerful. It was only adding this simple snippet of code, which is blindly writing to the offset 604048 in memory. So this memory offset was actually a kernel offset inside the kernel API, say access check. So all this modified BIOS function does is just write 0 to the offset of the jumping non-zero that you can see highlighted in red. So basically, it modifies the logic of this API. This API should actually grant access to a resource if you're authorized, or should actually give you access denied code if you're not authorized. So in this case, modifying this jump, the logic of the API is totally ruined, and say access check will always return access granted. So it can be quickly used for privilege escalation. But of course, it's not limited to that. You could imagine a function from the BIOS that injects a malicious kernel driver directly into kernel memory, and all sorts of malicious activities. We're also moving out again from the CPU, and we have seen attacks on also PCI expansion cards, expansion memory. Newer PCI cards, they have expansion memory that can be flashed to actually load additional updates or initialization code. A malicious rootkit could actually use this flashing feature to flash its own code into the expansion block of a PCI card. These expansion blocks are loaded very early in the booting process, so even before the BIOS. So in the proof of concept we have seen, always from Hisman, if I recall well, the code was actually infecting the PCI expansion block and was just installing a hook on the interrupt, and actually he didn't really need the interrupt. Then he only did this because he needed any interrupt that gets called early in the operating system. In fact, he then proceeded to let the operating system load normally. And when the operating system loads and goes into protected mode, early in the boot process of the operating system, there is this IPI, KN386 called BIOS, which actually we call some code with the interrupt 10, and that's where the actually rootkit virus code kicks in, and he's able in this way to land directly in the kernel mode. That's exactly what he was trying to do. And this as well, being able to detect PCI expansion modifications is not very easy. Not impossible, but it's a good hiding point. Yeah, in the last part, we talked early of the memory controller hub, which is the central part of the full architecture of the PC. And we found also attacks were demonstrated on this level by Tereshkin. And this is where I mentioned also the ring-3. Actually, the AMT is a management technology which is built into the memory controller hub, which is also referred to as the North Bridge. This basically, the AMT is just some code. It's a small operating system which is actually used to provide management features in case of catastrophic events. So even if you have a hardware failure or machine not booting, you should be able to access it remotely and restart the operating system or whatever. So this is basically, this MCH has lots of particular characteristics that are good for a rootkit. It runs in an independent environment, has full access to the memory via DMA, and it always runs even when the machine is in sleep mode, and there's access to a network card as well, network interface. So it's very powerful. It's a sort of PC inside your PC. And of course, in the attack, they were able to actually modify the AMT. They were not able to flash its firmware, but what they did was very clever. They actually find out the documentation says that when the machine is booted, the AMT memory, the AMT code is loaded into the top of the physical memory, in the very top. And the system is set to actually believe that you have less memory than you actually have. So actually the piece of AMT code, the green part, is actually invisible and does not exist. If you try to access this from the CPU, the memory controller will stop you and will give you an error code. But although it's invisible, the MCH also has a feature called memory reclaim, which allows you to remap some physical address space to some memory space that was lost. So in order to actually not waste RAM. In this case, they were able to exploit this feature, and they were able to instruct the MCH to remap some physical offsets of the memory to actually be routed towards the AMT code. And in this way, whenever they were accessing the right region here, that was the remapped memory area, they were actually able to access the AMT code itself. So they were able, in this way, to inject their own malicious rootkit into the AMT code, and that was basically the attack itself. Once you have code running in there, it's totally invisible. It has access to the RAM, so it can compromise the operating systems running, hypervisor. This is a very low level, so this would also bypass the SMM, would be at the lowest level possible. It was a very effective attack. In particular, this one only worked on the chipset Q35, this particular attack, so it has been fixed by Intel. But again, this is a very powerful attack vector, so it could be a very complicated to detect. Okay, so now we are moving out of the PC platform itself, and we are going to see other dedicated platform or even mobile devices that Mario will show you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, the cases we're going to cover now, it's going to be from a high-level kind of stuff. I mean, we're not going to go that deep into the hardware or anything because, well, they were either developed as proof of concept, these rockets, I mean, or some of them, not many details were disclosed after they were discovered. Well, the first case we're going to say is Ericsson case. This happened in Vodafone Greece, and well, this rootkit was mainly developed to attack an Ericsson switch. I'll give you a quick overview of the mobile architecture. This works like a mobile phone contacts a tower, which in turn gets to the base station, and all the calls are being routed by switch. This is the point the attackers attack, and what they try to do is they try to wiretap government officials. So basically, they were recording codes. Um, this is what really happened. They were well, they modified the operating system from the Ericsson architecture using operating system hot patching capabilities. So they gain control over the switch. And the rootkit modified the code blocks to enable hiding of malicious processes, which were including their own processes. It's estimated that it was about 6,500 lines of code. They modified these 29 code blocks. They also modified the routines reforming sections of the blocks. So when the people from Vodafone realized that there was something going wrong, they didn't realize at first that what was happening because the sections were right. They also modified the code responsible for the transaction logs. So they could basically hide commands. They got caught because they did an update for the rootkit itself, and what happened is that the update was failing, and they stopped sending SMS texts. So when they investigated it, they found out it was configured. The second case we're going to see is Stuxnet. You have probably heard about Stuxnet. It targeted industrial environments, and well, basically the idea is there's a step 7 software, which is this is only one of the Stuxnet components, and this is it was called the SCADA rootkit. This is a quick overview of how an industrial environment with a programmable logic controller would work. So the idea is Stuxnet was infecting actually code in the programmable logic controller, and well, an operator, the way he will use the step 7 software is he will make a request to the PLC, and all those requests they are being routed by a library, which is this one. And so Stuxnet was infecting the PLC, and what they did is they implemented the rootkit on this layer. So all the requests being made to the PLC, they were being hooked and they were being modified to actually hide the infected code on the PLC. So this is how it basically worked. This is a request being made to the library, and then at the time it gets back, the infected malware is in the PLC, and it's being hid to the user. So it's implemented on a software layer, but it's actually being targeting the PLC, which is a hardware device. It's believed that Stuxnet could have done this by infecting the PLC, by implementing the rootkit itself on the PLC side. But their approach was to do it on the software layer because probably it was easier to do. This is a rootkit which was developed for Cisco routers. It was done by Sebastian Muniz in 2008. And basically he didn't publish the source code for this rootkit. But what he did is he released a paper showing a couple of techniques on how he thought that a rootkit could be implemented for an iOS platform. So his idea is basically, okay, Cisco is giving us firmware for every router. So what I can do is I can implement a rootkit in the form of a C source, because Cisco runs on different platforms. They run on PowerPC, they run on MIPS as well. So this code would compile for every of them with just a few tweaks for a little areas where assembly has to be included for. Mainly if you're working on every device supporting that release of the iOS system. So his idea was like, okay, I can create a kind of a wrapper for all these function calls, well, for some of them, like system login, file system access, networking operations, or system log. So mainly everything rooted would work target. I will compile the rootkit, and using that, I can disassemble the iOS firmware, I can disassemble the rootkit itself, and using a few scripts, I might be able to insert the rootkit code into the iOS firmware. This has a few complicated points, like the I/O stream where it's compressed. There's a few checksums there which have to be corrected after it's set in the rootkit, and then the image has to be recompressed. Mainly, well, he wrote these scripts and he created the rootkit. This one was never disclosed, but in the paper there's a few details on how to do it, so you can check them out. We're going to move now into mobile devices. As a quick overview, these statistics are made by this company at Mobile, and they've been done using network statistics. So this basically shows how's the presence of those devices like on the internet. And I think this is meaningful because it really shows which devices are being used by users and which devices have sensitive information, like Gmail accounts, Twitter accounts, or whatever. So we can see on the top of them, it's iOS, which is an iPhone, Android, and the third one would be Symbian. Those other, like BlackBerry or Windows Mobile, they have very little presence on the network compared to the other ones. So in the mobile landscape, there's what looks like nowadays everyone is getting a mobile, everyone is using them, and some people is jailbreaking them as well. That means but there's a huge community around jailbreaking, and this would be in turn used by the malware creators to gain access to the mobile. Those web spider labs have developed two proof of concept rootkits. One of them is for Android, the other one is for iPhone. The first one doesn't use any exploit to get into the architecture, but the second one, the one they made for iPhone, they actually are using the jailbreaking exploit, the one you probably know. And well, it shows how they're silently installing the malware on the device itself. We'll see first the Android rootkit. Okay, Android, as you know, it runs on a Linux platform. So they've written this rootkit as a loadable kernel module. This doesn't differ much from the previous techniques used in Linux. Like, well, they're using the Linux kernel, so basically all the developed and research techniques for Linux, they might work on an Android mobile as well. So that means that it's relatively easy to develop a rootkit for Android because there's lots of information about it. On the downside, it has to be installed manually because, well, you need to have actually a rooted mobile to be able to install it. And the rootkit really, it does very little. It only hides itself from disk. It hides also its kernel module as well, and it has a backdoor. Well, they actually just show this as an example of what the rootkit would be able to do. Well, in this backdoor, they just hook in the syscall read, and they're looking for the CLCC command. That's an AT-AT command you get when you receive a network. And then they're checking the mobile number of who's calling it. And if it matches that number, then they spawn a reverse. So it's a really easy rootkit, but it shows that a rootkit could be done for an Android platform, and that's what we try to demonstrate. This is the iPhone rootkit. I'll explain to you a little bit. Well, this is actually how the jailbreak common start suite worked. So I'll explain you a little bit how did they manage to break into the mobile, how did they manage to get rid of the protection in the iPhone. So basically, an iPhone would request to a website. This website they would deliver a PDF file which has a few components. These components are the free type exploit to gain access to the mobile basically, and then they have another exploit which is a kernel exploit for I/O surface. So when that exploit is triggered, they will get rid of kernel protections such as the code signing. So they basically can run their own programs on the mobile. And then they are shipping as well an installer, well, when this gets delivered to the mobile, all those two exploits they trigger and they install it on load Cydia. So what these guys from Spider Labs thought is, okay, if we don't want to install Cydia, but we want to install our own malware, we only have to tweak this exploit and we can put malware on the mobile. So they developed a rootkit. They could only have put malware, but they also developed a rootkit to show the technique. This rootkit is only a user mode rootkit, so that means it doesn't run in kernel mode. Actually, it's kind of tricky the way kernel works in an iPhone, and they were not experts on the platform itself. But like, there's lots of people researching on that as well, like all the people who's doing jailbreaking. So probably a good rootkit would be developed for kernel mode as well. They only modified the system tools like LS, PS, Neverstart, so that actually would trick the people who had their mobile jailbroken. Because if they SSH into their mobile, they'll say, okay, if I try to list these files, they won't be there. If I try to see connections, they won't be there, and so on. So that would be the rootkit component. It's quite simple. And as a payload, they implemented a few things. They implemented a port knocking demo. So in a special practice, TCP sequence has to be sent to the mobile to get access to it. And then they had two main services, a bind cell service, which just gives you a cell on the device, and a VNC service. This VNC service is implemented as a static library, so it gets injected on the mobile substrate, which is a processor from the iPhone. So it won't be shown if you are just listing processes as well. And then they also implemented a device routing app, so they put here what's going on in the place the mobile is. Well, this is pretty much it. We try to give an overview of the different things we're seeing nowadays. What we think is Windows rootkits, they really getting good. They're evolving so fast. That's probably because malware creators are placing their efforts on that. And on the other hand, there's a few platforms that are emerging now, like mobile platforms, and there's probably going to be stuff developed for those platforms. There are also rootkits targeting specific platforms. This is what's happening with things like Stuxnet. We're not really sure what's behind that. What are they trying to do? Because like, well, in Stuxnet they were modifying PLC code, but we don't really know what's happening after that. So the rootkit landscape is likely to be evolving, and it's likely to be moving to some other platforms. You want to add something else? Or?
Yeah, we're just seeing a shift of the rootkit capabilities to get more deeper into the hardware. But this also means that they require more sophistication and more, they lose actually also portability and everything. So probably they won't be widespread too much, but still they can be used for targeted attacks and other powerful attacks.
We have also included with the slides of the references, so if you want to check out some references there. And if there's any questions, it's going to early in the morning.
I've got a quick question. The hardware, the move towards hardware for rootkits, do you see this as being a real life practical threat where all in a while they're going to choose this technique, and given that the rootkit detection methods on the market right now are not even finding good generic kernel rootkits?
Well, yeah, as I was saying, targeting hardware is more difficult because, of course, you have less portability and you're not bound to the hardware, and it's more difficult to find documentation, so the code needs to be tested a lot. And probably, I'm not sure if they will be like widespread in the wild like Tidserv and root, but they could still be used in very targeted attacks, or even in limited attacks, or even in scenarios like we're seeing the infections of the memory controller and the BIOS. You could think of scenarios where actually you have machines that are specifically crafted with malicious code in them to some organization to actually control them from inside. Attacks of this kind. I mean, there was recently, last year, there has been recent lots of times the point that actually there could be hardware modifications inside the CPU itself, and so which could be a powerful attack vector. And so this is why many actually organizations are checking exactly where the CPUs are manufactured. They are actually doing very strict controls in these manufacturing processes to avoid outsourcing the hardware manufacturing to countries or other organizations that could be not trusted for these attacks.
One more. Did you follow the whole virtualized rootkit, Joanna Rakowska versus Thomas Jacek, and the detection methods that were being introduced for trying to detect a hypervisor rootkit? And what do you think of those detection methods? Do you think?
Well, it wasn't.
For instance, like the time attacks.
Yeah, there were some attacks, mainly the timing attacks that were used from some people. Well, in the beginning, the blue pill code was not really complete, so it was easy to detect it. But then they actually implemented it in a better way. They added nested virtualization. There were some attacks also presented by other security researchers. The timing attacks, actually they were able to identify a hypervisor running, but actually Oscar raises the point that you know there is a hypervisor, but you don't know what's in there, so you don't know if it's actually a rootkit. Yeah, of course, if you have a machine and you are not running any hypervisor, and you run a detection and you see that something hypervisor is running, so you have an indication that something bad is there. But then again, it would be very difficult to actually get to analyze that rootkit. Or at least it's more complicated.
All right, thank you, Andrea and Mario.
Thanks.